took a trip to the Middle East.
Yes.
Where did you go? Why did you go there? What did you see? Tell us about it.
Well, I was very pleased to be invited to Tel Aviv for an SFL conference. And the interesting thing about Americans is that everybody's got an opinion about Israel. And the typical view towards Israel is that it's an unsafe place, and it's just one thing, you know, and that it's got a unitary ideology, and it has one influence in the world, and maybe it oppresses its neighbors, or it's oppressed by its neighbors, or something like that. And I think it's, you know, I wanted to go to Israel because I wanted to discover Israel as a real place with real people and a real history. And what I found was it just puts a lie to everything everybody says, essentially. I mean, this is a glorious, massively diverse society. I mean, actually a miraculous society in some ways. I mean, people from all over the world have come in, bringing the diverse traditions of language and history and religion and everything to come to a single place on the planet Earth to build and to be entrepreneurial and to create something wonderful. And that's what I found in Tel Aviv. So I just absolutely fell in love with the place, which is not, it's not like Madison or New York or Atlanta or something like that. It's not a very beautiful place. And part of the reason for that is the building codes. I mean, the government's very oppressive about buildings. You know, it calls everything a monument. So everything's kind of squatty and short and run down. But once you get through that, what you find is an extraordinarily prosperous and entrepreneurial tech sector, a society with zero crime, so far as I can tell. I mean, I've never been anywhere in the world that I felt so unbelievably safe. And it's not just safe in your person. I mean, the property is safe. People in Israel just take this for granted, but you can drive around on your scooter, never lock it, leave your helmet inside the seat, park it on a sidewalk, come back 3 days later, and it'll still be there. And everybody knows that. I mean, it's an extremely high trust society. I've never quite experienced anything like it. A beautiful and wonderful nightlife, and a burgeoning libertarian movement, and of course they have debates, you know, in Israel just like everywhere else. You know, there's a left and there's a right and there's a liberty movement, and within the liberty movement there's people who disagree about border security issues. You know, how should Israel respond, and so on. So, in other words, Israel's it's not just a normal place, although it is a normal place, but it's an extraordinary place in the sense that it has special features that you're not going to find anywhere else on the planet. So I fell absolutely in love with the place. And I also have a particular interest in Israel as a kind of fascinating experiment in the revival of what was previously a dead language. I mean, as far as we know, and there may have been other times in history, I don't think so, that a language that was not in use came into use just by sheer determination of will on the part of people to find a language that could unify Jews from all over the world. And in some ways, the vernacular Hebrew that emerged in the late 19th century and eventually came to be used after World War II as a national language in Israel was an invention. I mean, it was a codification of old poetic and liturgical Hebrew, but it had not existed as a vernacular at all. And the dictionary was basically written. I mean, it's kind of amazing, and was instituted through social pressure and through a sense of national pride and so on. And the first generation raised after the establishment of the state of Israel after World War II spoke fluent Hebrew. You know, the first generation since, I don't know, 1,500 years, 2,000 years, I don't know. But that's by itself a remarkable thing. And then Hebrew is a very beautiful language. I'd love to learn it, actually.
Campari is that way. It's so grotesque and so revolting that it's absolutely addictive. Like, I don't know, it's the innate desire of all of us to punish ourselves, something like this. So, I will have another drink of Campari because You can't just have one drink. And you will notice that I'm not being arrested, and maybe even notice that nobody is looking at me strangely, that I'm sitting on a park bench in front of the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange.
The other thing that was interesting about Israel is that it inspired me because when I landed, I looked up what was going on in Bitcoin land, you know, within Israel, and I went to the Tel Aviv Bitcoin embassy and hung out there for a couple of days, right across the street from the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange, and I met my people, basically, you know, the Bitcoiners. And so when I got back to Atlanta, I missed having that kind of central location where you could meet people and have an ATM there and get literature and really discover about Bitcoin. And so I just started it. So I started the Atlanta Bitcoin Embassy based on the Tel Aviv model.
Okay. So,
let me say one more thing about Tel Aviv that people don't understand, especially Americans. People imagine that somehow the state of Israel came into existence, you know, after World War II in light of the Holocaust as a kind of a concession to the Jewish community. Like, we shouldn't ever let anything like this happen again. We have to remember that, you know, a very strange thing happened before World War II. Almost the whole of Europe and North Africa and reaching all the way up to Russia and then East and West was taken over by a regime that had believed, as a matter of political ideology, in the extermination of the Jewish race. And that happened. I mean, people don't today think about it that much or even talk about it. And there's a poll out the other day that among millennials, like, people don't even know what the Holocaust is, you know, and it doesn't matter to them. But that was an extraordinary thing that happened in the 20th century. So Israel was created as a kind of a home for Jewry. But what people don't understand is that Jews have lived in, particularly Tel Aviv, for centuries and centuries. And old Tel Aviv, you know, really dates back in history. You know, large-scale property holdings and commercial holdings by Jews, Jewish families, and their descendants are alive today. And so there's a very old history. I mean, Jewish presence in Israel long predates the establishment of the state, or even Zionism. Yeah.
So the last time we talked, in Minneapolis, I asked you about how Trump compared to President Obama. What similarities or differences do you see between Donald Trump and Ronald Reagan?
Yeah, Ronald Reagan had a glimmer of liberalism about his ideological thinking. By liberalism, I mean classical liberalism. Like it's amazing. Ronald Reagan believed in free enterprise, for example. Believed in a competitive economy. He believed in people keeping their own money and property rights. He believed in freedom, you know, and he talked about it. I mean, you can look back at his speeches and tell this, and people should do that. Should go back and watch the speeches by Reagan. I mean, you can tell that he was a real believer in human liberty as a philosophy of life. Didn't always act on it, you know, and in many ways Reagan reminds me of Thomas Jefferson, like great in theory but terrible as a president, you know. And that was Jefferson. Jefferson was a terrible president, and Reagan was sometimes good, a lot of times terrible. But Trump, you just don't get any of this. You'll never hear Trump, and never have heard Trump, talk about the glory of free enterprise, or the right of the people to keep their money, or the right of the people to be left alone, or competition as a system, or entrepreneurship as a way of life, or human rights as something universal, or the government as the problem. I mean, the problem, not that he doesn't control it, but the core problem, the existence of government. Donald Trump is a very strange person in many ways, and I don't think people really understand what it is he's trying to do. He believes in a personal state, and we've never really had a president like that. Maybe Andrew Jackson was a little bit that way. I don't even think that holds up. Donald Trump really has in his head an ancient model of statism infused with a kind of neo-Hegelianism. So he wants to be the only source of power. I mean, personally, wants to be the only source of power in society. So he resents all competitive forces, you know, whether it's the Congress, or bureaucracies, or media, or anything else. This is who he is, and you could say, well, this is insane. And it is. But maybe no more or less insane than all forms of statism, actually. But that's what he wants to bring about. A personal state. He doesn't want to just head a nation state. He wants to establish a personal state of the sort that Machiavelli wrote about in The Prince.
Do you think President Trump will be reelected?
If he is, I don't think it's a given, but if he is, it will represent the greatest failure of the left progressivism, you know, in my lifetime. In other words, Trump might be reelected because people, as incredible as it may seem, will be more terrified of the alternative. And maybe that's right. Maybe that's right. I don't know.
Do you think that free healthcare and free education is one of the biggest motivations for the push for socialism and communism that we see right now?
Yeah, probably so. And what's tragic about free education, free healthcare, is that we probably already have them by now if we just left it up to the free market. Just like we have free Google searches and free trial periods for every form of software. And I mean, the digital world has given us free everything. I can call anybody for free. I can do video chat. I can achieve the Jetsons' dream of video, you know, calling anybody on the planet for free. So probably we would have had by now free education and free healthcare if it had been left up to the free market. But you know, 100 years ago, we decided we weren't going to do that. And so people have an intuition that that they have a right to these things. I don't agree with that, but I do agree it should be more available, and it should be cheaper, and it should be more responsive, and shouldn't be so damned annoying. I mean, American healthcare has gotten so grim. I don't know what it's like for other people, but there was a time when I got sick, I went to the doctor. Now, I'll do anything to stay away from these guys. I mean, it's terrifying to go in there. First of all, you have to wait like an hour and a half, or something like that, and then you get your papers checked, and they're running through all kinds of system. And God forbid they find something wrong with you, because you're not going to be treated by a doctor. You're going to be treated by a book a book of regulations issued by an insurance company, and shoved out of the hospital. And the doctor can't actually tell you anything that's wrong with you because of liability questions. I mean, for every 10 minutes they spend with you, they're going to spend 2 hours filling out paperwork. And the whole system is so terrible. And it's remarkable and predictable how bad it's become since Obamacare. It's like the more they regulate it, the worse it all becomes. And then people don't even remember. But I mean, it was 10 years ago when health insurance was vaguely affordable, and when doctors are opening up clinics all over the place. There was, we started seeing the emergency care places open up, and people were dropping their family doctors just to go to the little clinics down the street and that sort of things. The things were actually developing in a good way, and then Obamacare came about and just shut down all competition. You can't do that to an industry. You can't get rid of the competition within an industry and expect it to survive. And I think that issue, more than anything else, is what elected the Republicans to office in 2016, and yet they've done next to nothing about it, just almost next to nothing to improve it.
Last question for today, and to paraphrase, George Orwell once said, "By war becoming constant and never-ending, it has ceased to exist." With the war in Iraq and Afghanistan getting as little coverage as it does, is there some truth to what George Orwell once said?
Yeah, and there is. For most Americans, they just can't pay attention, and we've learned nothing. I think it's extraordinary. We're talking together, you know, the day after Trump launched another bombing assault in Syria. It's like, wow, what could go wrong? Everything. Everything could go wrong. Everything has gone wrong. I mean, did we learn nothing from Iraq? Nothing from Afghanistan? Apparently not. You know, every new president has to flex his muscles, use the bombs, deploy the military, and distract from the problems at home through war. Happens every time. We need to get wise to it.
All right, thank you
All right.
for your time.
Very good.
Thank you for watching, and if you'd like to support videos like this, please check out the donation link inside the description.